Chris and Elena, a local police officer and his wife, often noticed a quiet black 5-year-old girl who seemed to watch them from the shadows. No one knew where she came from or who she belonged to, but behind her silent eyes was a heartbreaking mystery that would soon unravel, changing their lives and making them question just how far they were willing to go to protect a child who wasn't theirs. The early morning sun streamed through the windows of the Morris household, casting a golden glow over the kitchen. Chris Morris, a tall man with dark brown hair peppered with gray, adjusted his police uniform. He took a deep sip from his coffee mug, savoring the warmth before facing another day on patrol. His wife Elena was busy making breakfast. After finishing breakfast, Chris kissed Elena's cheek before grabbing his keys. "I'll be home for dinner. Stay safe," he said, giving her one last look before heading out the door. Later that morning, Elena found herself at the local grocery store, picking up supplies for the food drive. As she pushed her cart down the aisles, she couldn't shake the strange feeling that someone was watching her. Glancing around, she saw nothing out of the ordinary, but as she neared the checkout, she caught sight of a little girl standing by the snack display. The child, who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, was staring directly at her. Elena smiled warmly, but the girl quickly ducked out of sight behind a stack of potato chips. "Odd," Elena muttered to herself, as she paid for her groceries and glanced back to the spot where the child had been. She was gone. Later that afternoon, Elena was busy at the community center, sorting through donations with the other volunteers. She was engrossed in her work when that same eerie feeling crept over her again. She looked up just in time to catch a glimpse of the same little girl peering around the corner of the building. "Hello?" Elena called out softly, but the girl vanished as quickly as she had appeared. By now, Elena's curiosity had morphed into concern. Who was this child, and why did she seem to be following her? That evening, as she walked home through the park, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the path, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Sure enough, as she rounded a bend, she saw the girl again. This time, sitting on a park bench, her legs swinging back and forth as she watched Elena approach. Elena was determined not to let her slip away again. "Hi there," she said, keeping her voice soft and friendly. "I've seen you around today. Are you okay?" The girl's eyes widened, her small hands gripping the edge of the bench tightly. For a moment, Elena thought she might run, but instead, the child simply stared at her with wide, unblinking eyes. "My name is Elena," she said gently. "What's your name?" The girl opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she slid off the bench and backed away, her gaze never leaving Elena's face. Then, just as quickly as before, she turned and bolted into the trees. That night, as Elena sat at the dinner table with Chris, she recounted the strange events of the day. "There's this little girl, Chris," she said, her brow furrowed with concern. "I've seen her everywhere today. At the grocery store, at the community center, even in the park." Chris leaned forward, his police instincts kicking in. "A little girl? What did she look like?" "She's young, maybe 7 or 8. Black hair, big brown eyes. She's been watching me all day. Every time I try to talk to her, she runs away. It's like she's following me." Chris rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "That does sound strange. Did she seem lost or in trouble?" Elena shook her head. "No, she looked clean, well kept. But there's something about her, something in her eyes, like she's trying to tell me something but can't." Chris reached across the table, taking Elena's hand in his. "I'll keep an eye out for her while I'm on patrol. If there's anything going on, we'll figure it out." The following morning, Chris began asking around about the mysterious girl. He showed a description of her to the local school principal, but no one seemed to recognize her. It was as if she didn't exist. Meanwhile, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the girl. Who was she? Why was she always watching Elena? That afternoon, as Elena was walking home from another shift at the community center, she spotted Maya again. This time standing at the edge of the park, her eyes wide with fear as she watched Elena approach. Elena stopped, her heart racing. "Please," she called out, her voice filled with concern. "I just want to help you. Can you tell me what's wrong?" For a long moment, the girl stood frozen, her big brown eyes locked onto Elena's. Then, to Elena's surprise, she took a few hesitant steps forward. "My name is Maya," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. Elena knelt down, relief flooding through her. "It's nice to meet you, Maya. Where are your parents?" But as soon as the question left Elena's mouth, Maya's expression shifted. Her face crumpled, and without another word, she turned and ran. That evening, as Elena sat in bed next to Chris, her mind raced with questions. Who was Maya? Why was she following her? And what had happened to her parents? "I saw her again today," Elena said quietly, breaking the silence. Chris turned to her, his brow furrowed. "The little girl?" Elena nodded. "She told me her name. It's Maya. But as soon as I asked about her parents, she ran away." Chris sat up, his expression serious. "Elena, I think we need to report this. If this girl is out there alone, she could be in real danger." Elena nodded, feeling a pit of dread forming in her stomach. "You're right. I feel like she's scared of something, Chris. I don't know what, but I feel like she needs our help." The next day, Chris officially filed a report with his department, and an investigation into Maya's background began. But despite their efforts, they came up with nothing. No missing persons report, no records. No one seemed to know who Maya was or where she had come from. Over the following days, Maya continued to appear, always watching from a distance but never staying long enough for Elena to ask more questions. It was as if the girl was silently pleading for help, yet too afraid to accept it. Then, one evening, everything changed. Elena was sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window when she saw movement in the yard. Her heart leaped as she spotted Maya standing just beyond the garden gate, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, Elena rushed outside, but by the time she reached the gate, Maya was gone. In her place, a small, tattered notebook lay on the ground. Elena picked it up, her hands trembling. Inside were pages filled with drawings, childlike sketches of a house, a woman, a man, and a little girl. At the bottom of the last page, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Help me." That night, as Chris pored over the notebook, his expression grew more and more concerned. "Elena, this isn't just a lost child. Something bad is happening here." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. "We have to find her, Chris. We have to help her." Chris nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We will. I'll take this to the station tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this." Over the next few days, the investigation intensified. Chris worked closely with his department, following every lead they could find. Meanwhile, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out for Maya. Then, one rainy afternoon, the truth finally came to light. Chris returned home early from work, his face pale and his eyes wide with shock. "Elena," he said quietly, "we found her." Elena's heart leaped into her throat. "Maya, where is she?" Chris took a deep breath, his voice trembling. "She's been living in an abandoned house on the edge of town. Her parents, they're gone, Elena. She's been alone for months." Elena felt her knees buckle as the weight of the revelation hit her. "Months?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Chris nodded, his eyes filled with sorrow. "She's been hiding, trying to survive on her own. She left that notebook because she didn't know who else to turn to." Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she realized the depth of Maya's suffering. This whole time, the little girl had been silently crying out for help, and no one had noticed. That evening, Chris and Elena drove to the old house where Maya had been staying. When they arrived, they found her sitting on the front steps, her small body curled into a ball as she watched the rain fall around her. "Maya," Elena called softly, stepping out of the car. "It's okay. We're here to help you." Maya looked up, her big brown eyes filled with tears. Slowly, she stood and walked towards Elena, her small hand reaching out to grasp Elena's. Elena knelt down, pulling Maya into a tight hug as tears streamed down both of their faces. "You're safe now," she whispered. "We're going to take care of you." In the weeks that followed, Maya was taken into protective custody, and the Morris family helped her adjust to her new life. It wasn't easy. There were many painful moments, and the road ahead was long, but for the first time in months, Maya was no longer alone. And as Elena and Chris watched Maya slowly begin to heal, they knew that they had made the right choice. They had answered her silent plea for help and, in doing so, had changed not only Maya's life, but their own as well. This story reminds us that sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single moment of compassion. What would you have done if you were in Elena or Chris's place? Let us know in the comments below. I hope this story brought light to your day. If it did, please consider subscribing. Your support allows me to keep sharing these stories, and I'm truly grateful to have you on this journey.